I read 123 books in 2023, and this is what I thought about all of them. Hi, I'm Anna. I am so glad that you are here on this channel, whether this is your first video or your 250th video with me. Thanks for choosing to spend a couple minutes of your day here. Now, obviously with 123 books, this is not the video that we're gonna go so deep into all of the summaries, but this is the video that I'll tell you whether or not you should read all of them. If I'm gonna be honest, 123 is a lot of books, and I don't know if I'm gonna do that again this year. I guess time will only tell. First book I started the year off with, I listened to via audiobook while doing a puzzle, I remember so vividly, and I finished it all on January 1st, but that was The Wish by Nicholas Sparks. Some Nicholas Sparks books are so good. Some Nicholas Sparks books are written to make you feel sad, and I feel like this is one that was written to make me feel sad. And by doing so, it did work, and it did make me feel a lot of things throughout the book. So I can't say it was just like awful, because it did what it was trying to do, but oh my goodness, if you are looking to feel happy ever again in your life, this is not the book for you. It is a beautiful story, but go in with caution. Next, I read Beartown by Frederick Bachman, which you have 100% already heard me talk about probably many times. I read it physically beginning of January, and just recently re-listened to it in audiobook because I loved it that much. It became such a favorite book for me. It honestly is in the running for all-time favorite book. It follows a community. You get so many different points of views. You get to like really know so many different characters, see how their lives interlock with each other. You see resilience, you see loyalty, you see people making hard choices. This one does not feel like it is written to make you sad. It is just written in a way that you cannot help but be so invested in the story and the people of Beartown. Next, I listened to Greenwich Park. I don't know off the top of my head who this is by, but I'm sure it'll show on the cover. This one I don't remember too much about. I feel like of thrillers, it does not stand out necessarily. There's like a certain genre of thrillers that are like British thrillers written by British authors, and all of those feel somewhat similar to me, and this is kind of another one of those, to where it's like thrilling parts of it are like various familial relationships, or like old friends or cousins, or like a spouse's relationship where it's like, oh, things might not be how they seem, and like what secrets is this person hiding? This one starts to feel very unrealistic, which sometimes books can, but I don't regret listening to it. I didn't rate it highly. I don't necessarily recommend. Next book I read was Memphis, and I believe that this is a debut novel. I think the idea of the story and even the story itself were great, and I'm very excited to see what this author puts out in the future. I think there were some like writing style things that just didn't really work for me, and I'm not someone who usually notices writing in books. Like if the story is good, I'm set, I'm ready to go. But my example for this is like 75% through the book, we started getting more descriptive details about like the house and the living room that we've spent the whole book in. So I remember thinking like, okay, I already have this image in my head, and now she's like, oh, and then the walls are covered in photos of all of these people, and the ceiling is pointed, and like there's all these colors, and I think, why didn't you tell me this at the beginning? Like, it's such a small thing, but like it took me out of the story. Not a bad book. There were some beautiful scenes in there, some beautiful characters in there, but I think I'm most excited for what she puts out in the future. The next trilogy, so cute, so good, the Tea Dragon trilogy. So there's the Tea Dragon Society, the Tea Dragon Festival, and the Tea Dragon Tapestry. These books spoke to me when I needed them to speak to me. They're sweet. They literally follow dragons in this world. They're tea dragons. So we have like chamomile. We have, I can't think of another type of tea, but we have it too. The art is so peaceful and wholesome. They obviously don't take long to read. Like they maybe take 10 minutes to flip through. Let me see if I can find a quote, because I know I kept pictures of these. It's all right to let those feelings wash over you and soak into the earth. That's when things start to grow again. It was like that's not the only thing. Like obviously there's the whole story and there's more beautiful quotes, but I just remember that one specifically stuck out to me, being like that's so beautiful. So for cute little books, they have stuck with me, and yes, read them. Next, I kind of switched genres about face into Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead by L. Cosimano. This was number 2 in the Finlay Donovan little series that we have 3 of so far. Finlay Donovan is a suburban mom with her minivan and her sticky kids who gets wrapped up in some crime, gets wrapped up in some murder. The first book starts where she's like an author and giving the plot for the book that she's wanting to write to her editor or her agent in Panera Bread, and the person next to her thinks that she's describing a real situation and assumes that she's a hit woman and like tries to hire her. So that's how that all begins. The thing about Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead, I don't remember what happened in it. I remember Finlay Donovan, I remember the feelings I feel when I read Finlay Donovan, but they just move quickly. They're pretty lighthearted despite the content. There's a little slow burn romance going on. So as a whole, I don't remember what I thought of the second book specifically, but like the Finlay Donovan series, I think is one to read. Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This book I gave it 5 stars when I read it because it really kept me hooked. It really surprised me. It had some wild twists in it, and also at the same time I haven't thought about it all too much since I read it back in January. It's unique in the sense that instead of doing like Just interrupted myself because I wanted coffee. It's unique in the sense that instead of doing time repetition, Groundhog Day style video where you're living the same day over and over again, she actually goes back further each time she wakes up. So she's getting like younger and younger in her life each time she wakes up, which is just so interesting to read. And there definitely was a twist that physically jaw dropped. Fastest Way to Fall. It's a little romance book. It's between like a personal trainer and his client. It's a book that is inclusive of sizes and romance. I remember just being sweet. Like it was escapism. It took me out of the real world. There are some things that just like should not happen in the real world, like a personal trainer getting with his client. Like I'm sure that's against, I don't know personal training ethics, but it started to feel a little iffy there whenever some of the book is based off of him being like, oh, that's a boundary I shouldn't cross, but then like continuing crossing it and then like, okay, but this is the one I'm not gonna cross, and then like crossing it. So like the romance cute, but there was a few parts of it that I was just like, maybe the setup could have been a little bit different. Overall enjoyable though. March, books 1 through 3. These are graphic novels that are, I don't know if written by, or at least partly written in partnership with John Lewis. So it goes through John Lewis's life, it goes through John Lewis's work, it goes through the movement as a whole, it goes through historical stories from, I don't know when it starts, but in the 1960s with the civil rights movement. And oh my goodness, what a creative way to tell history. Like the art in here, these are not graphic novels for kids, to be honest, because it is real about how brutal some of these scenes were and how brutal some of these people are. But in reading this whole trilogy, you learn so much about both John Lewis and also the other civil rights activists that he worked alongside, like Martin Luther King Jr., you know him, as well as others whose names aren't as well known publicly. Highly recommend. 400 Souls is a non-fiction book, and it is a long non-fiction book, and it has a lot of great content in there, but being a very long anthology that literally covers 400 years, I think you need to take it in more small chunks if you're gonna read it than I did, because my brain got drowned. My brain absolutely got drowned out by this book because I was listening to it and it was the only thing I was listening to at the time. I don't even know if I was physically reading a book at the time, and I don't think I retained as even a percentage of the information that I was learning. The 400 years it covers is from the start of slavery in the United States to present day. I believe 1619 to 2019 is when it covers. So much great history in there. I just think maybe there are more digestible books, which doesn't mean don't read it, but just be prepared to really be chewing on the little tidbits you read, you know what I mean? Finlandia, sci-fi book, dystopian, maybe speculative fiction. Did not like this. Did not like this. It was weird, and not in a weird that I was like, oh, this is weird and interesting, or like, oh, this is weird and creative. No. I'm sorry. There's not too many books that I just like thumbs down. This one I thumbs down. Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. It took me by surprise. I have seen people say like, oh, I knew the plot twist the whole time. I don't know how. I don't know how y'all did that, because I did not. I was jaw dropped. I actually made a little reading vlog on this one on my booktube channel that has since died. It's a thriller. I've heard it similar to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. Extended family in an isolated little cabin that their grandma lives in. It's only them on the island. They start getting as the night goes on. I did not see the ending coming, which made it quite enjoyable for me then once I got to the ending and just felt so shocked. I haven't loved all of Alice Feeney's books, but this is one that I understand. I understand. When Breath Becomes Air is a nonfiction memoir about a doctor that is discussing mortality, basically. He's actually a young neurosurgeon who just received a cancer diagnosis with a poor prognosis, and this is the book he wrote. So, it's a tough one. I say I didn't love it just for the sole fact of it sent me spiraling a little bit, but like because it was written well and because like he's sharing his story, and he's sharing his story when his story is almost done. If you are scared of mortality or not in the mood, wait to pick this one up. If you are into memoirs and are at all intrigued to hear this man's thoughts and this man's last days of his life, pick it up. Like it's a beautiful book, but oh, it's hard. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Can you tell I'm just like ping-ponging genres? Like these are in order. These are the ways I wrote them. So I went from that, When Breath Becomes Air, to the Southern Book Club's Guide for Slaying Vampires. This one I didn't love, but I did read quickly. Like I was into it while I was going through it, but it made me uncomfortable. It is horror. I don't read very many horror books. There are some scenes in here that to this day disgust me, which is respectable in the horror genre. Lots of times that's what horror authors try to do. So they did it. I can't in good faith recommend it. but if you are into horror, you might really like it. I've even heard that this is mild. This is why I don't go any deeper into horror. Then I read Heartstopper volumes 2 through 4, because I'd read volume 1 back in December of the year, even before this past year, and I just recently read volume 5 that just came out. But Heartstopper 2 through 4. Heartstopper is a little series. It's graphic novels too. So, I mean, graphic novels are so fun. They don't take too much of your time. They don't take too much brain energy, brain power, but they follow Nick and Charlie, two guys in England in high school who eventually have this sweet relationship. But the books just tackle things that teenagers go through. The books tackle Charlie being bullied. The books tackle Nick figuring out his sexuality. The books tackle family relationships. The books tackle mental health issues. The books tackle eating disorders. The books tackle mental health treatment, like, as well as having like sweet normal moments in there too. But they just, Alice Osman does not shy away from things that are deep in teenagers' lives, which I think is why these books hit so hard, is because it's like, this feels so much like real life, and like, you love the relationship, you're cheering for them, they're so cute, and also it's not just like rose-colored glasses throughout the book and throughout their teenage years. Another series that I read this year was the Will Trent series by Karen Slaughter. I read books 4 through 13 this year. That's a lot of books. I'm pretty sure Karen Slaughter was my most read author this year, because how could she not be? Books 4 through 13. Reasons I like the Will Trent series. They take place in Atlanta. That's fun. The murders are happening on roads I drive on every day. 2, she's a good crime thriller author. Like, she writes her little crime thrillers well. 3, I feel invested at this point. I always say it's like Criminal Minds, to where the characters stay the same through the books, but there's a different case that they're working each book. 4, I think her writing and her plot and character development, everything, have just gotten better as the series has gone on. The first one published in like 2006 maybe, and then the most recent one just published in 2023. So that's a span of years. That being said, cons of the Will Trent series. The early books have some problematic language, problematic concepts, problematic representations of people of color. And while some of the things she does in the beginning books are not forgivable, you can see how she grows as a person with her books as the books get later into the series. So it's always hard for me to recommend this series, because the first books I don't recommend. The first books I gave like half stars to, but the later books I feel like are really good. So that's that on that. The Three Lives of Alex St. Pierre by Natasha Lester. I talked about this one in my 2023 favorites video. It's historical fiction. It's World War II. It's Paris. It's fashion and dresses. It's secret spy. It's a budding romance. Love. Recommend. I read all of the Ramona books this year. You know, Ramona Quimby. Those were good. I read them just for nostalgia, because I used to listen to them on cassette tape whenever I was going to sleep at night. So honestly, a lot of them I like barely remembered, even though I haven't listened to them in so long. So I listened to them all 1 through 8, and they're sweet. They're middle grade. Like, it's nothing too groundbreaking, but it is nostalgic, and so I do like them. Read Ramona. River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer is also in my 2023 favorites video, so of course, recommend. Another historical fiction. Family. Lost family trying to find family. A little bit of magical realism, maybe a little bit. A mother's love. An island setting. I liked it. X's and O's, a little romance. I could not tell you what this one is about. I think it was cute as I was reading it, but since I don't remember too much about it, I don't think I can like wholeheartedly say recommend. Like, it didn't stand out, but I think if you just need something sweet and quick, kind of Valentine's Day, time of year-y, it could be a good one. Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun was number 3 in Finley Donovan that came out this past year. This one I remember takes place at a police academy. The slow burn romance, you start getting a little more. Some people did not like this one. Some people thought the 3rd book was not good. I loved it, I ate it up. I will be getting the 4th one and reading it as soon as I can in this upcoming year. I think it's called Finley Donovan Rolls the Dice, I'm pretty sure. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I didn't like it, but that didn't mean I didn't enjoy it. Does that make sense? There's a full spoiler reading vlog on my old booktube channel that is now dead, but the video is still up if you want to watch it. Did not like it. Still had some enjoyable moments through it. Fly Away by Kristen Hanna. This is the book that takes place after Firefly Lane. No. I remember ranting about this book at some point in my life. I'm sure it's on this channel if you want to find it. It's a no. Community Board. Oh wait, this one I actually have in person. Not me forgetting that I actually like have books back here that I was going to be holding. Which ones have I missed? Look, this is a Karen Slaughter book that I own. Here's another Karen Slaughter. We already talked about her. Fairtown. Love. Okay, now we're caught up. Community Board by Tara Conklin. I loved this, but I loved this in the way that it felt like quarantine times, whenever your brain thinks every thought that you can have and you just like start doing random things and life doesn't feel real at all. That's what this book feels like. It does not take place in the pandemic, don't you worry. But Darcy's, I forget if it's her husband or like her longtime partner, breaks up with her, gets with his skydiving instructor. She just wants to feel some comfort in this world, so she goes back to her parents' house, only to find out that her parents moved to Arizona and just didn't tell her because they didn't know how she she would take it and didn't think she would take it well, which she doesn't, but she's like, okay, if you're not gonna live in this house, then I'm gonna live in this house. So she just becomes this little isolated hermit for a little bit, working through her things. Eating food, finding ways to keep herself busy. She is such an imperfect main character, but I loved her for it, and I really liked this book. I really liked it. The Honeys. This one's classified as horror. It didn't feel as horrific as Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, but it is classified as horror. It's like summer camp and bees and a sister who either like goes missing or is killed, I can't remember, and then a sibling who is trying to find out what happened, and so like goes to the summer camp and like gets in with the it girls, but there's like a lot running under the little it girls group that does not happen in the world that we are living in. It's weird. If you like weird and you like having no idea where a book's gonna end up, this one's probably a good one for you. It made me uncomfy through it because I don't know, maybe I'm too vanilla for it. I could see where some people like it, but I don't necessarily recommend it, other than the fact that like, can you please read it so you can tell me what you think? Thanks. Beach read, Emily Henry. Cute, romance, fun setting. Emily Henry is just always gonna be a recommendation from me. Even if she writes books that aren't good, I'm gonna recommend them. Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows. This is a book I don't hear people talk about. I don't know a single other person who's read it, but it follows our main character who is in London, I believe, and she starts teaching English classes to like the older woman in her community, and they like find smut and start reading like this smutty little book. And then the men find out about it, and the men don't like that. The elders are not happy with that going on. Like, it's already bad enough that she's teaching women English and teaching them how to read. But then add that layer into it. That's the main storyline kind of going on, but there's also a lot of other things. Like, there's a romance going on. There's kind of a mystery going on. The climax of this book is a lot all of a sudden is going on. I do recommend this one. Next Year in Havana by Chanel Cleeton. This is a historical fiction book where I learned a lot, but I learned it without feeling like I was learning it because it was just through the story as it takes place. But it follows a family in Cuba as the political unrest in Cuba is like beginning and how their life changes, and it talks a lot about how many Cubans aren't in Cuba anymore, like kind of fled as refugees and then haven't been able to make their way back, but they still obviously love their country so much. So like even the title, Next Year in Havana, in the book is like something, maybe it's in real life too, that people like say to each other kind of as like a hopeful thing of like, oh, next year we're back in Havana. It's a sweet book. It is a series too that follows like different sisters in each book that I've meant to get to and I haven't gotten to yet, but I do like this one. I reread Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone because the illustrated versions I learned about, and so I wanted to read the illustrated versions. From my local library, I did not purchase any books. They're nostalgic. I like Harry Potter. Steeped in Secrets. It's a mystery, a little cozy mystery that I didn't like. It wasn't that good, in my opinion. Sorry, don't need to spend too much time on it. Nick and Charlie is a little novella that takes place with Nick and Charlie from Heartstopper. Remember them? Remember them? This one's a novel though, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it was a graphic novel. I think it was actual words. Nick and Charlie takes place between volumes 4 and 5. No, wait. Nick and Charlie takes place after volume 5 in the Heartstopper volume. So now that volume 5 is out, you can read Heartstoppers 1 through 5 and then Nick and Charlie. I don't really remember what happened in Nick and Charlie, to be honest with you. I think it has something to do with like college. Can we be long distance in college? And it's a novella, so it doesn't need to go into too much more than that. But it's still Nick and Charlie. We still love them. Us Against You by Frederick Bachman is number 2 in the Beartown trilogy. You already know how I feel about Beartown, so guess how I feel about Us Against You. Oh, I like it even more. You need to read Beartown so you can read Us Against You. I have not read the 3rd book in the trilogy yet, but it is ready on hold from the library for me, so it may be coming in the near future. I think I'm finally ready for it. 8 months after reading Us Against You for the first time, I think I'm ready to go on. I also re-listened to this one on audiobook in like late December. Like I just finished it. I don't know how to use my words to tell you how good these books are. I'm at a loss for words. I just need you to read them. Thank you. And then I read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Same, not too many new thoughts. I mean, they came out 20 some years ago. Every thought's been thumped. And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. Oh, novella. It rips your heartstrings out. Basically, it follows a grandpa, an older man, and it kind of watches as Alzheimer's starts to grip his brain and as it gets more and more grips on his brain and told from his point of view, and it's so beautifully written. And Frederick Bachman is such a good writer, but oh my goodness, in 70 pages, it gets ya, but it's good. Recommend. Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute is a YA romance by Talia Hibbert. I mean, it's nothing like too deep. Like it's a high school romance. I feel like it's fun sometimes to go back. Like we don't need romances with adult worries and people paying bills and people in careers. We don't always need that. Sometimes we just need a little academic rival who always gets better than you on the test and he thinks you're so uptight and y'all, I'm sorry, I don't know where that came from. And you guys really just popped out there. And you guys, like, I forget what it is. I don't know if they get detention together or it's something just so schooly, but then they end up going on this little camp together. It's cute, it's fun. Read this one. Then I read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. It's kind of spread out through the year, these ones will be. After that, I listened to The Perfect Marriage, which is a thriller. I feel like if you don't read thrillers all too much, this could be a good one just to kind of get your feet wet. If you read thrillers more, I don't think you'll really like this one just because things have been done before and been done better. Mad Honey, I actually have. Yay me for not forgetting this time. Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan. They wrote it together, edited it together, just like a joint voice of them writing it together. This was a good book. It has suspense. It has a slow trickle of information that's leaving you just wanting to know more and more. It has a plot twist that is kind of, I'm unsure about, but I think maybe it handles it well. I don't know. I want you to read it so that you can tell me what you think too. I rated it highly. I did enjoy it as I was going through it. Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I did not love. I know that's unpopular. I'm sorry. I just like didn't get into it. I just didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't really care all that much. And I feel like in other Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, the character development is better. And I understand that this one, like it's written in interviews and stuff like that. So it's different. It's not necessarily told from one person's perspective. However, at the same time, I just didn't love it. Happy Place. Look, I have like all of these books right here. Happy Place by Emily Henry. Of her books, this one didn't necessarily reach a top point. It's second chance romance. We don't love second chance romances over here. I don't always. Because either we broke up the first time for a very valid reason or we broke up the first time for a dummy reason that like we shouldn't have broken up over, you know? That's what I feel like about second chance romances. So it's hard whenever a book has a second chance romance because it's like, dang it, like how's the author gonna do this in a way that convinces me? The vibes are still good. The banter is still good. Emily Henry is a banter queen. The setting is still good. We get friendship relationships alongside a romantic relationship. So there's a lot going on in here and I do love Miss Emily. The Box, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse is a cute little book that my sister actually got me. Forgot, it's over in that room. Sorry, I would go grab it, but it's a cute book. It's a sweet book. It's a small book. It's a kid's book. So, Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting. This one was fine. This one is fun if you like just like a random group of people becoming acquaintances and getting to know each other better and then getting like intermingled into each other's kind of drama a little bit. And this book happens to be the group of people who are usually on the same car as they're commuting in Great Britain somewhere. And so it's like you get everyone's different kind of points of view and you get like what they think of each other. You know, it's like, oh, that annoying old lady with her weird sweaters and her dog she always brings. But then like later they actually get to know who she is. You know, that kind of thing. You're like, oh, that old uptight guy on his way to his big high paying job, loser. But then we like actually get to know who he is. So it's cute. And then it's just like a meshing together of all different kinds of people and we see what happens. The Silent Patient was a thriller that I listened to. It was interesting. I know this is a good like get back into reading book for people and I definitely see why because the premise is interesting. I don't really remember anything about the writing style. I feel like it was twisty, but I don't really remember it all that well. Stories from the Tenants Downstairs. This was, I keep saying interesting. This was an interesting one. It's short stories and it's short stories that all take place from tenants in the same building that is kind of in the process of being gentrified. All of the tenants have like their own struggles. And it's not necessarily a feel-good book. It's not really a lighthearted book. I don't know. I think I liked the premise maybe more than I actually liked reading it. An Ember in the Ashes. This is a little fantasy book. I was like, let me get into fantasy. Let me get my toes wet. Let me see what's happening in the fantasy worlds. I was into it as I read it, but I don't really feel the need to read any more in the series. I feel like I keep trying to read fantasy because everyone's loving fantasy and I just like haven't quite found where I fit in fantasy, like with the books that I enjoy. I like the idea of fantasy. I just feel like sometimes when I'm reading it, it's hard. It's hard to get into. The Matchmaker's Gift was a cute premise and I also feel like by the end of the book, I was just really ready for the book to be over. It follows like a main character whose grandma was a matchmaker back when she was young. And what we learned through the book is that it actually is like a little bit of magical realism. Like it wasn't just like she was arbitrarily making matches. Like she could actually like see when people's matches were there. So that's the thing. But then her granddaughter inherits the gift and it kind of comes to fruition in like a trivial time in this granddaughter's life. And I think maybe she finds her own match. I don't really remember that specifically. Like it was a cute premise, but it just kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, let's wrap it up here, guys. A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. Oh, it's by Frederick Bachman. What do you think I'm gonna think about it? Oh, love it. I did own it, but I gave it in a book exchange recently because I wanted to spread the love, wanted to spread the joy. A Man Called Ove is if the montage in Up were a novel with a little dark humor sprinkled on in there. But like, and the novel kind of keeps going instead of the direction that up goes in a different direction, you know? But like as far as like that love story, and then there's an elderly man that is a.bea.s that we meet and love. You have to read this book. Like you have to. You do have to. Deep and Dark and Dangerous by Mary Downing Hahn. I read when I was in like 5th grade, and it was like the it girl book in like 5th grade. So I wanted to reread it and see if it was still the it girl book. I mean, it's middle grade, so it's hard for me now to be like, oh, it's not good. Like, no, I loved it when I was 10. So it was a great book when I was 10. I don't really felt like I needed to reread it though. Like after rereading it, I was like, meh. It's literally everything that I remembered it to be, and I didn't remember that many things, but it just is what it is. Hotel Laguna by Nicola Harrison. It's a historical fiction, but I feel like what's fun is that it's a historical fiction that isn't too deep. I feel like a lot of historical fictions are like during really trying times in history, and this one is more so just kind of cute. It's like a personal trying time post-war instead of a communal trying time during the middle world wars, you know? It really is just that this woman, she had a job through the war because women, you know, were allowed to work then, and she really loved her job, but now that the men are coming back, they're like, no place for you anymore, and so she's like, well, what do I do now? And that's us figuring out what she does now. A Psalm for the Wild Built is, I think it's sci-fi. I feel like it gives cozy fantasy vibes, but it's like cozy sci-fi, which is cute. I don't know how to describe it super well other than just, it's kind of the same as the Tea Dragon Society. Whenever it was just like, it's this own little story that's happening that just has little tidbits in it that you're like, woo, that got me. Like that's what I needed to hear right now. And sometimes it takes a whole different world and different species of creatures going through something to really just touch your heart in the way that it needs to be. The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This was in the 2023 Best Books of the Year video, so you've already heard about it, and it's a recommendation. Hold You Down by Tracy Brown. Also in that favorite books video, so you've also already heard about it, and you should definitely read it. Loveless by Alice Oseman. I always change how I say that last name. I don't know what is correct. Loveless was a like, not love. I don't remember why I feel that way, but I do remember just feeling like, okay, instead of being like so super invested. But I really wanted to love it, and that was the thing. She Started It by, oh, this is coming out of the corner of my brain, Sean Gilbert. I may or may not be right. Was a thriller that I feel like was just on the line of being like, I needed it to be a little bit more crazy wild out there than it was. It was like, it was teasing me with how wild we're gonna be. It was interesting though. Like if you're looking for something that's like not that good, but that you still might enjoy, this is probably a good one for you. Then I read the illustrated version of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Then I read The Perfect Couple by Ellen Hildebrand. I really like Ellen Hildebrand's books. I feel like I like her more recent ones better than her older ones. This one, like, it had nothing wrong with it. It was a little mystery taking place on a wedding weekend on Nantucket. So like, yeah, that's pretty good. I just feel like since I've seen what she has done in more recent years, this one kind of felt lacking a little bit. Probably just because she's gotten better. And now that I'm used to her being better, it's hard to go backwards in time, you know? The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Like, not love. You can read it if you want, you don't have to. Night Bloom is a book that I'm seeing is on my list, and I genuinely have no idea what this book is, which maybe is my opinion in and of itself. Night Bloom. Oh, good. I actually wrote a review on Goodreads for this one, so we can see what I thought about it, even though I have no memory in my brain right now. I said, pros. I like books that take me into a culture that is different than my own. I liked the structure of this book. You read an entire story basically from one friend's point of view, then start all the way back in childhood and go to present day in the other's point of view. Okay, I'm remembering that now. That was cool. Cons. It was missing a little je ne sais quoi. It felt a bit tangential at times. Overall, between average and above average. There we go. My past self said it better than I could now, I guess. The Inmate by Frida McFadden. A thriller, a mystery. Frida McFadden writes books that are so easy to quickly read. They are very twisty, and a lot of people call them like popcorn thrillers because you're just like, as you're reading them. So it's not like it changed my life, but it was not like I regretted reading it. I probably will read more by her, maybe. I feel like what she loses sometimes is that like in the thrillers that she does, they've all been done before, kind of by different people in different ways. And then also a lot of the like integrity of realistic life gets lost because in order to fit her thriller plot, like for instance, The Inmate took place partly in a prison, and just like a lot of it, it's just like that's not how prison works, which is sometimes fine to write books in ways that is not how prison works, but it's just like I was so distracted by the falsehoods. Double Indemnity. This was a mystery book that I like randomly found on Libby, and I was like, sure, I'll give books I've never heard of a try. No, not with this one. No. Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Oh, this was sweet. This was second chance romance, but it was like childhood friends to lovers, except there's the second chance part in between there where they weren't together. It was cute. It was sweet. I really liked it. The Radium Girls by Kate Moore is a nonfiction book, but when you read it, it doesn't really feel like it. Like, it feels like a fiction book. She honestly, I feel like, compiles stories so well. She's the one that wrote The Woman They Could Not Silence that I read sometime in previous life. And so because I read that one and really liked it, I wanted to read her first book, The Radium Girls. And while I did learn a lot about Radium Girls, it is very long. It is very long of parts that probably could have been shorter. So take with that what you will. The Green Mile I have with me. I'm not forgetting to hold these out anymore. The Green Mile is my first Stephen King book I ever read. It was interesting. I felt a lot of things as I went through this book. I have not yet read another Stephen King, so this is like the only book that I can base his authorhood on, but based on this book, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get why he has the name that he does. You Could Make This Place Beautiful. I don't have many memories of. I think it's a memoir. It might be a memoir about a divorcee. I think that's it. So I feel like it just wasn't very relevant to me. Cinder, the young adult sci-fi novel. I had read it when I was smaller, so I wanted to read it again. I was kind of like, I've always thought of it. I remember the cover so well, so I was like, oh, I wonder what happened with Cinder. So I reread it, and it was fine. It was fine. Then I made the mistake, this is further down the list, but then I read the second book in the Cinder series, Scarlet, and I wished I did. So if you're 13, you'll probably love them. My grandmother asked me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. This is the only Frederick Bachman book that I have not just like absolutely loved. The writing style felt very different in this book, and then the story was like intermixed with a lot of like imagination from the main character child and like kind of folk stories that like her grandma would tell her, and it was like all of that was intermingled into the plot as we were going through the plot too. So lots of times I just felt very like convoluted while I was reading it. It's the only Frederick Bachman book I've read that I just haven't loved, which I hate saying, but read other Frederick before you read this one. In my opinion, Monet, a literary book that I think I listened to, and I think I listened to while I was doing something else, and so I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I'm sorry. I believe it follows a Ghanaian family, and that's kind of all I remember from it. I feel bad. Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. This is a cute one. This is like a cozy mystery, and Vera Wong is an elderly woman who, in the tea shop that she owns, there's a body that's found, and she feels like the police can't do their job, so she kind of starts taking up the investigation herself, and she starts kind of befriending all of the suspects she has because she wants to stay close to them to kind of suss them out a little bit, and ends up even doing like suspect group dinners and stuff like that. So it's like, it's cute, it's funny. I honestly don't really remember how it ended, but I feel like it doesn't even like matter that much because it was more just like for the vibes throughout the book. I liked it. Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown is a nonfiction book that goes through like the words and the language we use for emotions, which is cool. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was beneficial. I think it's fun to learn about language to put behind emotion. Next is when I read Scarlet, the second one of Cinder. We already discussed that. Then I read Dune. Dune was an accomplishment. It was a feat and a half. I feel like it drained my brain so much that I don't have anything else to like talk about it about. It's sci-fi. It was written in like the 60s, I think. It's like, it's a classic. It had the movie that came out recently and the second one that's been supposed to come out for a while and keeps getting postponed. I listened to like a Dune explanation podcast alongside reading this book because if I didn't, I would have been so lost and had absolutely no idea what was going on. I felt accomplished by finishing this book, but I don't necessarily think other people need to read this book unless you just like are seeking a sense of conquering a book. I don't plan to read the later ones in the series either. Adelaide, I read, no, I listened to, and while I don't remember everything that it was about, I feel like that's a common theme. Whenever you read 123 books, you don't remember them. While I don't remember everything it was about, I just remember that it was like very real life, and I liked the way it portrayed, I think, young adulthood. Maybe was that what it was about? Is Adelaide a young adult? I remember feeling like it was written well. I maybe need to like re-listen to it so I can pick up on more from it. I Will Find You by Harlan Coben. I had never heard of this author before, but apparently he's a well-known author. The book did feel written by a man, but it also felt like a good, fun, fast-paced thriller. Pineapple Street is a book that follows very wealthy kids that are now not kids, but are still very wealthy in New York City. And while it's like rich people drama, it also is like, I can't sympathize for you when you're complaining about having a trust fund. Like, it's interesting to listen to, and also, no. No. And I think it was written with that like intent in mind. So it did it well. One Summer in Savannah. I'm pretty sure it's a debut novel, which for a debut novel, it was absolutely incredible. It's a pretty like slow pace, kind of a budding romance, kind of a past family drama, all taking place in Savannah, Georgia, which fun setting, island, swampy. There's a different word. Marsh. The marsh. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I recommend it. Big Swiss. I heard so much about. I think I liked better in premise than an actual book. Big Swiss is about about a girl who transcribes a sex therapist's sessions and kind of starts to like fall in love with one of the clients and then like ends up meeting her in real life. The premise is great. The Summer of Songbirds is cute and campy. It's like 3 adult friends who have been friends since they were kids, and the summer camp that they always went to is about to close, and so they kind of go back for like one last summer. It's very August. It feels so August. I think it was good, but I don't think it has to be like top of your list. But if you're looking for just like a nice kind of feel goody but like still has some depth to it book with a campy setting, pick it up. Don't Believe It. I have on my list that it's a thriller. Oh, I know this book. Okay, this actually was a lot better of a book than my forgetting it just show. This is Don't Believe It by Charlie Donlea, and it was actually my best books of 2023 video. I feel like the issue is that I read it on an ebook, so I just like didn't see its cover all that often, so I just like don't associate the title with the story. But I talked about it in 2023 favorite. It was a good book. You can go to that video to learn more about it, but I recommend it. A Long Walk to Water. I could not rate because I could not come up with a rating. It's a short book and it's middle grade, and it follows a lost boy of Sudan. It was interesting to read. I think the parts that kind of felt a little weird to me were that I don't know how much of like a historical expert the author actually was in the situation, and I never looked into it either. It was just like based on reading it. I was like, I don't know if she feels confident in what she's talking about. And then another weird thing was that like it kind of wrapped up with a happy little bow at the end, whereas like Sudan hasn't yet. Like, does that make sense? Like it felt like very like, and then everything was okay, and like that's not true. Like definitely there's still like moments of joy and stuff, but like it's not just like, oh, and now we're sunshine and rainbows. That's what felt weird about this book. I don't think you need to read it. 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hildebrand. This is what I'm talking about when I say Ellen Hildebrand's newer books I just eat up and absolutely love. This one was in my 2023 favorites too. Definitely can read this one. Remarkably Bright Creatures has Mr. what's his name? Marcel the octopus. It's a little magical realism. It's a little found family. It made me love octopi. It's sweet. I feel like it's been quite popular over the past couple of years, and I think that's for good reason. Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Julie, not positive that's her name, is the second book of The Firekeeper's Daughter. I loved The Firekeeper's Daughter. I don't think I loved Warrior Girl Unearthed quite as much as I loved The Firekeeper's Daughter, so I'll just use this time to tell you to read The Firekeeper's Daughter. Thank you. Good Bad Girl, I think by Alice Feeney, is what I was referring to earlier when I said I haven't always loved all of Alice Feeney's books. Thank you. The end. What Lies in the Woods, weird thriller, weird thriller. None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell was a shocking Lisa Jewell one for me. I haven't always loved her books. This one was interesting. It'll keep you guessing. It'll keep you thinking until literally the very last page. The title ends up holding true, where you're like, what is true, Lisa? What's going on here, Lisa? But I think she wrote it very well. Part of Your World, I have. Part of Your World by a.bea.s. This is my I feel like I'd heard about this book for so long before actually picking up. It's like big city doctor girl falls in love with little small town farmer boy kind of. And it's fun and it's cute and it's lighthearted and it's a good time. Then I listened to A Court of Mist and Fury, the second one in the ACOTAR series. I am glad that I listened beyond ACOTAR because it gave me more of a picture into why people like this series. I have heard that A Court of Mist and Fury is the best book in the ACOTAR series, which is kind of a bummer, like when you get to the second one and then it's like, okay, that was the best one, and now from here on it's just downhill. But I do like where A Court of Mist and Fury ends up so different from ACOTAR. So it kind of gave me a better idea into like, oh, this is the world that people are in love with. That makes sense. So I did actually enjoy my time reading A Court of Mist and Fury. Then I read The Bodyguard by, is it Catherine Sinner? Male celebrity, female bodyguard. Male celebrity feels like he doesn't need a bodyguard. Female bodyguard's like, well, that stinks because this is my job, so here I am. And it becomes a little suspenseful, a little scary at points, but also is a little romance that's blooming and budding. So it's interesting. I think you could definitely read it. Yours Truly by a.bea.s. is the main character in Part of Your World. It's one of her friends that we're following in Yours Truly. I liked the first like 75-85% of it. The last part of the book kind of just like took a left turn nosedive that Part of Your World did not, and so I wasn't expecting it and I didn't really want it. I don't think it should keep you from reading it, but it just was a little more disappointing to me after having such high expectations from Part of Your World. Then I read Fourth Wing. I'm sorry, I did not like Fourth Wing, and like I talked about before, I just like haven't found fantasy books that I do like, so that could just totally be a me thing. But I did not like Fourth Wing, and it put me in a reading slump, which then made me mad at Fourth Wing. My guess is if you're watching this video, you've already heard of Fourth Wing, so you probably already decided whether or not you're picking it up or already have, so that's okay. You don't need me to tell you. What finally got me out of my reading slump was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Hockey romance, not for you if you don't like smut, but I ate it up. This one had me giggling, had me kicking my feet. I've got the second one, Wildfire, that I bought that's back on my shelf back there that I'm planning to read next, and I really liked Icebreaker. It was what I needed to get me like back into reading. It was like while I was reading it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is why I read, after Fourth Wing stole that from me. We're almost done. Then I listened to Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix because though the illustrated version of that one has come out, it hasn't come to my library, and I was kind of just ready. I was like, let me just get a move on my little reread of this series. So I listened to it. No new thoughts, only old thoughts. Then I listened to A Court of Wings and Ruin, and that's when I decided to no longer continue the ACOTAR series. I could barely get through this one. I barely did it. It was very long, and it just wasn't my thing, and I think that's okay. And for the remaining books in the series, I just watched Carrie Can Read's YouTube summaries of the books so that I understand the lore and that I know what's going on, but I just did not feel the need to read super long books anymore from the ACOTAR series that I just didn't love. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Then I read The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This one is a mystery, but it's like a riddly mystery, which is fun. I feel like there's not too many kind of riddles, tricks out there. It's about a girl who seemingly randomly gets picked by a billionaire in his will to inherit his fortune, with the asterisk that she has to live at the house for a consecutive year after he passes away in order to get the fortune. But there's like lots of little tricks going on, hidden rooms, secret tunnels. It's interesting. It was fun, and I do plan to read further on in the series. I think there's 4 books out now, I think. Counting the Cost is a memoir by Jill Duggar. So interesting to listen to. She reads it, so it's kind of fun listening to it and hearing it in her own voice, but she just talks about her experience growing up as a Duggar and on 19 Kids and Counting, and also kind of her separation from 19 Kids and Counting. Very beneficial, I feel like, to hear people's stories in their own voices, and so I do recommend listening to Counting the Cost, especially if you already know the Duggars and like Duggar lore you've grown up with. Good to hear from Jill. Hidden Pictures by Jason, I don't know how to say his last name. The 7-Year Slip. I just recently listened to. I had tried to read it when I was in my little Fourth Wing reading slump and couldn't get through it. I think it was a better experience listening to it. For me, it was a like, not love. It was sweet, and it was, I understand why people love it. It just like didn't quite hit for me. I was kind of bummed by that because I was kind of excited for it. And then lastly, last book I read was Bye Baby by Rolla Levering. This one comes out in March of 2024. It's not a thriller, but it's kind of a thrillery, suspensey tinged contemporary where it's 2 best friends who grew up and are no longer quite as close anymore, and one of their babies gets kidnapped and it's the other one who did it. And so that kind of, we already know that going into the story. So then the book itself, it's kind of figuring that out. Like, what do we do now? Now that I kidnapped that kid, what do I do now? Which is very interesting. Out of these 123 books, are there any that we share opinions on? Are there any that we differ on? Do you have any recommendations for me heading into the new year of reading, 2024? Which, like I said, I don't know if I'll be reading quite as many books again, but it was fun for 2023. Thanks for joining me in this little video, and I'll see you next time.